Welcome to the Diabolical Vulgarian Troglodytism. I'm the Vulgarian Troglodyte. So today I'm gonna do a music questionnaire where I'm gonna answer a bunch of different questions about music. And ChatGPT came up with these questions, and I think it came up with some pretty good questions about music. I also asked it some further questions so that it would add even more questions here. But yeah, this is what I asked ChatGPT first. So, could you make me a music questionnaire? The questionnaire should have general questions about music that any music nerd can answer. The questions could be about personal music preferences, genres, formats, bands, songs, concerts, and music criticism, etc. Then it answered me, absolutely, here's a music questionnaire tailored for music nerds covering a range of topics, personal taste, genres, formats, bands, criticism, and live music. You can use this as a survey, conversation starter, or content piece. Well, for me, it's a content piece, although hopefully also a conversation starter. But these are the categories that it came up with first. So personal music preferences, genres and styles, formats and listening habits, bands, artists and songs, live music and concerts, music criticism and culture. But then I asked it a couple further questions. So I said, could you add a few more questions about albums to the first section of the questionnaire? Then it said, of course. So it made an updated version of this. And then I asked it, could you add questions about recent listening habits and experiences? Then it said absolutely. And there is a new section here. But I'll start with this section, then I'll go back up later on because this was supposed to be the first one. Yeah. So the first question here is, what's the first album you remember truly loving? Well, that's a very difficult question. I got into music very early on and I was listening to albums as a kid, although back then I was definitely more of a song person, but I still collected CDs and I listened to full albums. Well, one of my first favorite bands was Children of Bodom, this like pretty popular Finnish metal band. So I think maybe the first album that I truly loved was one of their albums, so maybe album like Hate Breeder, it could be that. Or it might actually be Hate Crew Death Roll because I fell in love with Children of Bodom after I heard the song Bodom Beats Terror from that album. Although I don't remember if that was the first album I listened to front to back, but I think it might have been. So I'm gonna say Hate Crew Death Roll by Children of Bodom, and I still like the band and I like that album. Not as much as I loved as a kid, but I still like it a lot. Second question, what's your go-to album when you're feeling down? Well, I often tend to listen to music that makes me feel even more down when I'm down. Well, one is Songs About Leaving by Carissa's Weird. I absolutely love that album and it's very sad and it often makes me sad when I'm already sad. So that's definitely one. And then, I mean, Heaven or Las Vegas by Cocteau Twins. That's an album that often makes me feel better. So it's a good one to go with when I feel down. Yeah. Well, those are two. One that makes me even sadder, and then one that kind of uplifts me out of the sadness. Then number three, do you prefer listening to full albums or playlists? Well, full albums any day of the week. I don't really listen to playlists. I mean, sometimes I might make a playlist for my long walks because these days I often do these 8 to 10 kilometer walks, and it often takes me like about 2 hours to do those walks. So I often or sometimes make playlists for those walks. Although recently I've always kind of picked 2 to 3 albums for those trips that I listen to front to back instead of playlists. But yeah, at home I don't really listen to any playlist, and I also don't listen to playlists made by any other people. I only listen to playlists that are made by myself, but usually not even those. But when I was younger, in my late teens, I had this kind of electronic music playlist that I listened to a lot, but these days I don't really use playlists. Do lyrics or instrumentation matter more to you? Well, instrumentation every day of the week, like the actual music, instead of words is what matters to me. But lyrics can matter too, and they can add to the experience, the music experience. But I wouldn't listen to anything like any music just because of the lyrics. The music needs to be good. But then like great lyrics can be the icing on the cake. And of course, it's always nice if the lyrics kind of fit the music, then they kind of can add to each other and make each other better. Yeah, yeah. Then what's a perfect song in your opinion? So I wonder if this question means like what makes a perfect song, or do just have to give an example of a perfect song? Well, I can try both, but well, an example would be "There's a Light That Never Goes Out" by the Smiths, because that's my favorite song of all time, and I think everything works in that song. It has great lyrics. The music fits the lyrics. I love Morrissey's voice. Of course, Morrissey is an asshole, but he is still very talented when it comes to music. Yeah, the melodies in that are great. Mars guitar playing is great. I also love the small kind of orchestration on that song that kind of adds to the sound and the mood. Like there's this kind of string kind of in the center of the mix when you listen to it with headphones that really adds to the vibe. It has great chorus, great verses, like everything about that song I absolutely love. And that's kind of the song that if I knew that I was gonna die, like let's say in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I would love to put that song on and think about my life one more time and then die. Yeah. To die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. Yeah. But then what makes a perfect song? No, well, I think it's obviously it's a personal thing that, well, for me, of it needs to touch me some way. It's usually kind of very instinctual what is perfect and what is not. And many different types of songs can be kind of perfect in my opinion, but of course, usually the melodies need to be good. And yeah, it's just a really hard question because I love so many different types of songs. So I don't know if there's any kind of universal thing that I could say about all of them. But yeah, I think I can't really answer that in a good way. So I'll skip it. What album do you revisit the most and why? Well, that's quite hard to say. There's quite a lot of albums that I revisit a lot. I mean, Ghost Reveries by Opeth, one of my absolute favorites. I revisit that often. Well, I mentioned Songs About Leaving, that I listen to quite a lot. Transatlanticism by Death Cab, I listen to that a lot. Then in the past, like 18 or so months, like definitely Kylie Minogue's Disco and then Madonna's Like a Prayer. Those albums I probably listened to the most in the last year and a half. Deadspell Omega's Paracletus, then Peripheries, all of their albums almost, except maybe the first one. And then, well, Heaven or Las Vegas by Cocteau Twist, I mentioned it already, but yeah, that definitely, and there are many others as well. Yeah. Name an album you think is flawless from start to finish. Well, I'm gonna mention Heaven or Las Vegas again because that's like one of those albums where I can say that every single song is one of my favorite songs of all time. I cannot say that about even most of my favorite albums. But yeah, and I also just mentioned like the songs, albums that I revisit the most. But I think most of those albums would kind of fit this question really well as well. What's an album you think is underrated or overlooked? Well, I'm gonna mention one. So we have this band called Trespassers William, and we have this album called Different Stars. That's an absolutely gorgeous album. It actually really pains me that this is so underrated because I think this actually has quite a lot of even, well, maybe not mainstream appeal, but quite a lot of, like, you could say, quite popular appeal because it's again dream pop. It has some shoegaze elements, slowcore elements, and I think this type of music has become more and more popular in the last few years, and I think even my generation, Gen Z, likes this type of music a lot. And this like is kind of a mix of it has some Julie Cruise elements, like even the instrumentation sounds like kind of those Angelo Badalamenti type of things. So we have those like similar type of guitar kind of effects here and guitar sounds, and it's very simple and vibey, beautiful. And then the female vocals are really amazing here. Yeah, I think again this album, so many people would love this if they just gave this a go, but people just don't know about it. Yeah. And if you want to listen to one song from this album, I would go with Lie in the Sound or Alone. And this three track run from Lie in the Sound to Alone is just absolutely amazing. And I think many of you would love this album. I often try to recommend this to my friend Tony, so I'm really looking forward to the day when he eventually listens to this album because I think he's probably gonna like it a lot. Yeah, but this is absolutely incredible and very underrated, unfortunately. Hopefully, people will find it eventually. Then, what is next? What's a concept album that actually works for you? Actually works for you. That's a interesting way to put it because I think many concept albums are great. Well, To Pimp a Butterfly is a great concept album, I think. What else would be a good example? Kind of blanking here, but I have listened to so many concept albums. Periphery's Juggernaut, I think I absolutely love that. Yeah, well, those are a couple, but I like so many concept albums, and I love the idea of a concept album, even though again, lyrics isn't the most important thing for me, but I still like that it has that kind of concept to it. Have you ever had your opinion about an album changed drastically over time? What caused the shift? Well, that has happened me many times. Of course, it has happened kind of both ways. That's something that I didn't like. I started loving later on, and then the other way around that I used to love but don't anymore. Well, for the latter, for example, the Slipknot's like first album, I used to actually love that as a kid. And I mentioned Children of Bodom already, but Slipknot and Children of Bodom were my two favorite bands as a kid. And I loved so many songs in that album, like Surfacing and Spit It Out. But today, I just don't really enjoy Slipknot's music, although I sometimes listen to again some of the songs that I just mentioned for nostalgia, but I don't really love them anymore. Even though again that album I don't think it's bad, but to me it's now more like a 3 out of 5 than 5 out of 5 album. And then like the other way around, well, like drastically. Well, for example, Danny Brown's Atrocity Exhibition. Like the first time I listened to it, I really hated Danny Brown's rapping. But then, as later on I got back to it, I just fell in love with again his rapping, but also the production and the whole album. And now it's one of my absolute favorite albums, definitely in my top 50. So yeah, that would be another example. Although I didn't kind of hate it on my first listen because I liked some of the beats and stuff, but the rapping was something that I hated. But then I fell in love with it later on. And what caused the shift? I think it's just like again my music taste developing. There's not much more to it. So yeah. Do you prefer cohesive albums or collections of great individual songs? No, well, either one works for me. I don't really have a preference. Like, if songs are just good or great, like that's kind of enough. Whether they are cohesive or not cohesive, and I love many type of music where there are so many different elements that it can go from country to death metal or whatever, like between the Buried and Me and stuff like that. So yeah, so either one works for me. Which album has the best sequencing track order, in your opinion? Oh, that's a very difficult one. What would be one? Um, that's really difficult actually. Like, what would be a great kind of very dynamic album? Like, I'm not sure. I usually don't pay that much attention to track order. I just mostly pay attention to the quality of the music. Although I mean, sometimes I think about like how well an album kind of flows. But oh, God, well, I think Disintegration by The Cure flows really well. But I'm not sure. I would say it's the has the best sequence in. Well, I can't think of any better now. But yeah, that's a question that I would need to think about more. I think. But yeah, let's go to these and then we go back up and go to the original questionnaire. Recent listening habits and experiences. What's the last album you listened to from start to finish? Well, I'll show you. It was actually a really great experience. I was actually kind of blown away by this album, and I already think that this is gonna be like a new favorite. So it's this second album by the very famous hardcore punk band Dead Kennedys, Plastic Surgery Disasters. So like a few years ago, I had listened to their first album, which I liked, but I never really got back to that because I didn't love it. But now I've been in a huge punk mood, although mostly kind of post-hardcore, but some of this classic hardcore punk stuff as well. But this one was just absolutely mind-blowing front to back. And this one actually has like really good sequencing. Again, in regards to the kind of previous question. But they are very solid musicianship. I also really like the sound of the album. Good lyrics as well. Though again, the lyrics I only listened to this album once so far, so I need to pay more attention to the lyrics in my later listens. But the guitar playing was so much fun. The songwriting was so energetic and fun. And again, I like that it wasn't as basic as many of the early hardcore punk albums are. This like had a bit more kind of interesting kind of musicality to it, I would say. But yeah, I'm already pretty sure that this is gonna become like a all-time favorite. Like I gave it 5 stars, and I just loved every second of it. So I'm very much looking forward to going back to this one many times in the future, and probably adding it to my favorites list in the near future. But again, I don't add albums to my favorites list after just first listen. I want to listen to it more to make sure that it's a favorite. So, but absolutely incredible record. I think one of the best records of the 80s, probably. Yeah, highly recommend it. And I think you don't even have to be that much into punk to appreciate this because, okay, like I said, it has just great musicality, great songwriting. We like the vocalist as well. Now I need to listen to their other albums and then also go back to the first album. Yeah. Have you discovered any new artists or bands recently who stood out? Well, if you go to my like recent history, there are some here. I mean, there are quite a few here. Well, this one I really enjoyed, for example, The Fall of Troy, Doppelganger. And there was one song in this album that I actually knew, like the third song, this one, FCP remix, because I used to play Guitar Hero 3 and I kind of remembered, oh, that was from Guitar Hero 3, and that's actually really good song. And this was really good, kind of very matty, post-hardcore album. It has those screamo elements to it, very energetic and fast, and great musicianship, great songwriting. Really enjoyed this album. Could see this one becoming a favorite too. So the Fall of Troy, like Moss Icon, great, like early post-hardcore or early 90s post-hardcore. Propaganda, I listened to a couple of their albums. Fun, fun band. They are actually kind of like, they really reminded me of one of my favorite bands, Protest the Hero. And then I actually found out, like after I had listened to some propaganda, that oh, they were like maybe the main influence of Protest the Hero. So that wasn't very surprising because the kind of attitude and So the musicianship was quite similar, even though they are also at the same time very different bands. But this is another post-hardcore band that has like great musicianship, both guitars and bass, and also drums, like really good vocals and interesting lyrics as well. Yeah, cool band. This one I also really like. Today's the Day, Willpower. This is like a more of a post-hardcore metalcore album, but I think from what I've heard that this band made it to more of a kind of sludge metal direction later on. But I want to mention this because this is actually kind of the latest addition to my favorite albums list. It's McCluskey Do Dallas by McCluskey. So incredible post-hardcore kind of noise rock album, kind of bit similar to like Drive Like Jehu, which I love, and bit similar to Fugazi, and even bit similar to like the crazier side of Pixies, because this some of the things actually here sound very much like Pixies, and I like Pixies a lot. But this is just one of those like very noisy punk albums with like funny lyrics, doesn't really take itself too seriously. Great variety of songs, it's very heavy, aggressive, usually kind of mid tempo. Yeah, very vulgar as well. Like the first song is absolute banger called Lightsaber Cocksucking Blues. Absolutely love that song, but all the songs are really killer. And I think this is one of the best post-hardcore albums I've ever heard. And yeah, I've been kind of really addicted to this album that I've been listening to at least some of it like almost every day. So yeah, I really love this album. Yeah. And I've been in a huge post-hardcore mood that I've almost only been listening to that. And this is probably my favorite album of the year so far. Wildhjärtas Der Skogen sjunger under evighetens kranar. And it's not surprising that it's my favorite of the year because their last album was my favorite album of that year. And the new Yule album, shout out to that as well. Again, not as good as Soft Scars, but still very good. And Big Black, songs about fucking, like fun album. Although I prefer their previous album. But yeah, those were some recent things. What's a song you've had on repeat lately? Well, I just mentioned McCluskey, but like the Lightsaber Cocksucking Blues song is definitely one that I've listened to a lot. Then what else would be? Um, I mean, I haven't had that many songs on repeat lately because I've kind of been just exploring a lot of kind of new albums and bands rather than being obsessed about like one particular song. Yeah. Are there any older artists you've just gotten into for the first time? Well, I think I just kind of uh, mentioned that. So, for example, Provacanti and McCluskey. And with McCluskey, I need to listen to their two other albums as well. How often do you explore new releases versus revisiting favorites? Where it really depends. I think I almost have a bias towards like listening to new stuff, but when I say new, I don't mean just albums that are coming out now, but also just albums that are new to me. But of course, there I love revisiting favorites. I obviously there are some bands that I can revisit all the time, and then I have some favorites that I don't revisit as often. But every time I revisit them, I really enjoy the experience. But yeah, sometimes I might have like a 3 week period when I just feel like yeah, I'm gonna listen to the Smiths and the Killer and Madonna because I love them. And then sometimes I might be just all about getting into new stuff. And the last kind of couple of months have been mostly about kind of stuff that's new to me. Do you make seasonal or mood based playlists? If so, what's your current favorite? Well, not really, but again, mood and seasons can affect my music listening, especially mood rather than seasons. Yeah, but I don't really make any playlists. But again, I have certain type of things that I go for in certain types of moods. Yeah. Has your music taste shifted noticeably in the past year or how? Well, I mentioned that I've been listening to lots of post-hardcore, and I think that that's the kind of genre that I started really getting into last year. Of course, I had listened to some earlier as well, but I think I kind of fell in love with the genre last year, and now that I've been in the mood for it again, I've been just falling in love with it. even more and more. And yeah, that might be like my favorite kind of punk adjacent genre along with like grindcore. Yeah. What's the most surprising thing in your current listening rotation? What would be the most surprising thing? And again, I don't really have a rotation currently because I'm listening to so much new stuff. Um, I don't think I actually have any, so I think I have to keep that question. Yeah. You listen to music while working or doing other tasks. What kind? Yeah, I do. Sometimes I just listen to music on its own without doing anything, but sometimes I also do it while I do something. Like, for example, just browse the internet or like play games. Although I'm not much of a game player anymore, but I sometimes play like go back to like old favorite games like old school RuneScape. An old school RuneScape is actually a really good game to play when you listen to the music because it takes no like brain power at all when you're just grinding the tasks. And I actually feel like I sometimes can concentrate better on the music when I play old school RuneScape because it's just like mindless clicking. But then you do the clicking and then you kind of focus on the music. Yeah, and then yeah, of course, like when I go to walks, I love to listen to music then, and that's kind of how much of my music listening has been lately. And in the past, I've sometimes also listened to music when I've studied, but usually I don't do that anymore. So yeah, what app, platform, or format do you use most for listening right now? Why? Well, I changed from Tidal to Amazon Music earlier this year. Although I really miss Tidal, I actually overall prefer Tidal to Amazon Music. But the reason why I'm been sticking to Amazon Music is that it has a better selection of Japanese music because one flaw in Tidal was that like many Japanese bands and artists didn't put their music to Tidal. That's not as much of a problem with Amazon Music. So yeah, that's pretty much the only reason. Otherwise, I would use Tidal. Yeah. But now let's get back to these kind of other questions here. So genres and styles. So again, this was the first uh, version of personal music preferences, but we did these already with added questions. So now we have genres and styles. Which three genres best define your music taste? Though that's a difficult question. And I wonder whether I should go with like subgenres or just genres. Well, definitely metal music is would definitely be one. Then I would say pop music, although that's a very kind of varied term. But by pop, I mean things like again Madonna, Kylie Minogue, Björk, and even like Fiona Apple and yeah, things like that. So dream pop, art pop, things like that. Beach house, yeah. And then what would be the third one? Well, maybe jazz. I listen to quite a lot of jazz. But yeah, I listen to quite a lot of soul and hip hop too, and classical and many other genres like post-hardcore, like I mentioned. So, but I'll go with metal, jazz, and pop. Yeah. And if I had to go with subgenres, I'm gonna go with dream pop slash shoegaze, then uh death metal maybe. I don't know. Or I just say extreme metal, so death metal, black metal, whatever. And then maybe maybe like well, I don't know. Like with jazz, it's hard to pick any one genre. But anyway, let's move on. Which genre do you respect but just can't get into? Well, I guess country music. I respect country musicians. I think many of them are very talented at playing instruments or even singing, even though it's not necessarily my type of style, at least not yet. Name a genre you only recently started appreciating. No, well, post-hardcore and I would say also grindcore is something that I've really gotten into in the past, like year and a half or whatever. So yeah, many of those kind of punk adjacent genres. Yeah. Do you believe genre boundaries are still relevant? No, yeah, I think yeah, they are very relevant, especially for music discussion, where we gonna have to describe music. But at the same time, of course, there are many bands and artists that kind of push beyond genres. Of course, many people have been talking about Sleep Token lately, which is a band that I haven't really listened to a lot, so I cannot really say whether I'm a hater or a lover. I've only listened to a couple of their songs, like a few years ago before they really blew up. So I really enjoyed kind of Fantano destroying them, even though again I have no opinion of my own on it. Yeah, but yeah, they can be. But at the same time, I really enjoy when people kind of push those boundaries and mix genres together. But yeah, they are mostly relevant that in the way that for like music criticism and describing music, I think. What's an overrated genre in your opinion and why? Well, I would say like punk, rock. Again, not punk in general, because like I said, I like many types of punk, but they're like kind of like original punk rock. That's just yeah, let's pay power chord here and power chord there, and that's it for the whole musicianship. And yeah, it's just so kind of simplistic and boring to me. But I like the attitude, but it's just kind of I think it needs a bit more sophistication, bit more depth to work. So yeah, formats and listening habits. Vinyl, CD, cassette, digital, or streaming. Pick your preferred format and explain why. Well, yeah, mostly I use streaming, but as a kid, I really loved CDs. And like a few years back, I was started buying some vinyl, but I never got the vinyl player and the speakers because I couldn't really afford them. Especially because I kind of want to get like proper setup when I do. But I bought maybe like 15 to 20 like vinyl records. And I love vinyl mostly because again they obviously they look very cool and it would be like very cool to collect them. And yeah, if I in the future have like more money, more space, I would love to get back to that and get a nice setup and stuff. But currently I can't justify it like with my limited budget and my other collecting hobbies. So yeah. And streaming is of course just very convenient. And again, these days it sounds really good as well. Again, Spotify sounds like shit because it's not hi-fi, but the other big streaming services that have hi-fi quality, they sound really good with good headphones. And again, I have my like good Audio Technica headphones, like the ATH M50 X or whatever they are. Like yeah, they're bit over like 100 euros. They are really good and classic model. Of course, they don't compare to like, people who buy like headphones with like 500 euros or 1000 euros or whatever, but they are really good for the price. Yeah. Yeah, streaming, I just like it because it's so convenient and it again tends to have everything that I want. There are some like I wasn't an artist that I have to maybe go to YouTube to listen to, but for the most part, things that I want to listen to can be found on streaming. How often do you listen to music in a focused, no distraction setting? No, well, pretty much every day. Like, yeah, there are certain like periods where I might be so focused on some other things that I'm not listening to as much music. Like for example, if I'm really addicted to a TV show and I'm binge watching it, then I might take a like a small break from music. But for the most part, I listen to at least some music in a focused setting and a focused mood almost every day. So yeah. But I also listen to music when I'm distracted sometimes as well. I can listen to music in almost every context you can imagine. So yeah. And sometimes even though the setting might be no distracting, I might kind of distract myself with my anxieties and stress and overthinking and things like that. Yeah. Do you collect physical music, vinyl CDs, tapes? If so, what's your prized piece? Well, I just talked about it. I don't really have a prized piece. I mean, I have this record called Palimpsest by Protest the Hero. I got one of the color variants of it, and I think they pressed only like 500 or 1000 of it when it came out. So I think it's currently out of print, and maybe I could get some money for it on eBay or whatever. But it's not that like rare or anything. But it's something that wasn't pressed that many copies of. So yeah, what's your take on algorithmic recommendations? For example, Spotify's Discover Weekly. Well, I don't use them that much, but I think they can kind of create that kind of a awful echo chamber where you kind of where a person is just stuck to listening to one type of music. So I think they can be harmful, but I've sometimes gotten like good recommendations from the streaming services, but it's mostly the place like when you have like a, let's say you go to the artist page of Fugazi on like a streaming service, and then it says that people who listen to Fugazi also listen to this band, so it might have like Unwound and Drive Like Jehu and McCluskey, Pixies or whatever, and then I might like try out one of those bands and really like it. So that's something I've used in the past, but not really the algorithms. How important is audio quality to your enjoyment? It's very important, although I would still listen to music even with bad quality, but I think it's important. And I've noticed, like, for example, the first time I went from Spotify to Tidal, like the experience was so different when the Tidal quality is so much better and I could hear new nuances to some of the songs that I liked. Although sometimes it actually made me like maybe some songs less, which is weird because they sounded kind of more spacier and better, but for some songs it worked better when they sounded a bit more compressed. Although I think I eventually also got used to the new better sound, and then I love those songs as much as I ever did. But at first it can be a bit weird. Yeah, but it's very important. Bands, artists, and songs. Name a band or artist whose work you've explored in depth. I mean, there's so many. Opeth is one. Cocteau Twins, I would say. The Smiths. Yeah, well, there's a few examples. I mean, there's so many. Who's the most underrated artist of the past 20 years? Well, I mentioned Trespassers Williams, so I think they are, although past 20 years, that's over 20 years. So what would be one? I mean, there are so many, but it's hard to kind of say off the top of my head. Well, I'll check rate your music very quickly. Like, is there any year that we could mention? Well, this is actually a great kind of metal band from Japan that I love a lot called Imperial Circus Dead Decadence. I would suggest this album, for example. And I think this band, like, they have the potential to have way more fans. Like, it's kind of a mix of melodic death metal with some even power metal and symphonic elements. It's very progressive, very quick and very like fast tempo and very intense, very virtuosic musicianship, even some deathcore-esque vocals. But I actually love this album. And this is, by the way, one that has been on kind of a regular rotation a lot this year and also last year. Absolutely love this album. Yeah. Yeah, it can be hard to listen to front to back in one go because it's fairly long and it's just complete intensity front to back. So yeah, that's a great one. What's one song that changed the way you think about music? I don't think there's any that completely changed my think how I think about music. Okay, there have been songs that changed my way how I think about like an artist or band. Like for example, when I used to kind of dislike or not like Radiohead that much, but then when I just listened to OK Computer for the first time and I heard the song Paranoid Android, yeah, that kind of made me slowly fall in love with Radiohead. Yeah. Name a band or artist you've outgrown and why. Well, for example, well, I used to like Jennifer Lopez quite a lot, although I haven't listened to her lately. That I might still like her if I listen to her, but that's one that came to mind. Oh well, many of the kind of some of the classic metal bands like Metallica I used to really love, and I think I already mentioned also Slipknot. Like many of these like mainstream metal bands, even Disturbed I used to like, and Avenged Sevenfold. Like Avenged Sevenfold, I can still listen to a couple songs and enjoy, and I like the guitar playing of Sinister Gates and stuff, but the vocals I hate. I always call Am Shadows the castrated version of James Hetfield, and again, that's not a compliment. Yeah, so that those are some, and why, well, with those kind of mainstream metal bands, the reason is mostly that I want my metal to be kind of a bit more heavy hitting, usually and heavier, and I guess because I want my metal sound like a nuclear explosion, basically, rather than kittens meowing. So, yeah. What's your favorite deep cut track by a popular band? Well, that's a very good question. I think there are probably many because I often tend to like the kind of deep cut songs more than some of the like very popular songs. But I'll show you one. So this was a pretty big band back in the 80s. Okay, not as mainstream anymore, but called Prefab Sprout. And they have this album called Steve McQueen, and I think is one of the best pop albums of all time. I absolutely love this record. But there's this song called Hallelujah. That's probably my favorite song of this album. I love like Bonnie and Appetite, When Love Breaks Down as well, but this is probably my favorite. It's such a gorgeous and beautiful and lush sounding song, very catchy as well. Great vocal performances, great melodies, absolutely everything is amazing about that song. But I think I once checked on Spotify and it was one of the kind of least streamed songs of this album, which kind of really baffled me. Like, how can that be possible when it's so amazing? So definitely check out Prefab Sprouts Hallelujah if you haven't heard it. And also definitely listen to this record front to back. It's just absolutely incredible. I think if you like band like Blue Nile, for example, you might like Prefab Sprout. What was your first concert and what do you remember most? Well, I'm not quite sure what was the very first one, but one of the first one was like Lordi, a Finnish hard rock band who wears those costumes. They won the Eurovision Song Contest in 2006, and then the same year they performed this free show on my small town. And yeah, so what do I remember the most? Well, this kind of out like the town where I was living in, like there's lots of like alcoholics and substance abuse users in that town, and there was this town drunk in the audience, like dancing and going crazy with the music. So that's one of the things I remember the most, and I think there at least used to be even a YouTube clip about it or something. Yeah. Okay, his name was Denny. Yeah. What was your first concert? I mean, we just did that. What's the best live performance you've ever seen? Hard to say. Well, one of my favorites was like one of my favorite bands called Periphery. I saw them live in London back in, I think, November 2019. And they actually recorded a live album of that concert that I went to. So that was cool. But again, back then I was absolutely obsessed about them. I think like back then I used Spotify and I think it said that it was like 50% of the music that I listened to. And I was like one of the like zero point 0.5 like top fans. So I listened to them like hundreds of hours in a year. So of course I was so excited. And they started with a song called Reptile and I was just so like was just full of smiles and so happy when the kind of orchestral intro starts that song. And then when it gets heavy, like yeah, I loved it. Although one of their guitar players couldn't attend that show. Again, his name is Mark Holcomb, and I love his guitar playing, but it was still a great show with the other two guitar players. So yeah. And then Dream Theater I saw in 2020 just before the pandemic, and actually that concert was also shot for a live album and was also a live Blu-ray. So that was definitely kind of a sight to see that crazy musicianship live. Yeah. Do you prefer small venues or stadium shows? No, well, I've been to both, but I definitely prefer small or venues because it's more intimate and less people. It's like the stadium shows that are just absolutely full of people. Like, yeah, they of course there is some magic in there as well, but yeah, I prefer small venues. And I also prefer small venues to festivals as well. Yeah. Do you enjoy live albums or do they not capture the experience? Yeah, I can enjoy them, but I usually prefer like live kind of Blu-rays or just like pro shot concerts that you can find on YouTube, like when they might shoot like a concerts from certain bands in like festivals and stuff. I tend to like to kind of watch and also listen to the performance rather than just listen to a live performance. But I've also listened to live albums and it can be cool. But yeah, sometimes it captures the experience, sometimes it doesn't. Have you ever traveled to see a band live? Where? Well, I've gone from city to city, but not for different to different countries to see anything. So the longest distance was probably maybe 200, 250 kilometers, so not that much. Do you read music reviews, Pitchfork, and ME, etc.? If so, who do you trust? Yeah, I sometimes do read like Pitchfork, for example, not like regularly, but from time to time. And I don't necessarily trust anyone, like, but I just enjoy reading them. And then if it sounds interesting based on it, I might go check it out. And of course, I love these kind of music rating sites and stuff. So I do read reviews here, rate your music. Some of them are cute, some of them aren't, but I like to read kind of reviews from regular music fans as well. Is music criticism still relevant in the streaming era? No, well, it's only relevant for us music nerds. I think most regular people don't really care about it. Like for example, Sleep Token has gotten so big recently, but the critics have kind of destroyed them in many reviews. So I don't think the critic opinion there really matters that much. But yeah, I think music criticism can be interesting, although I have my own problems with it as well, which I want to make a video about at some point. But yeah, it doesn't have that much relevance. But although I think someone like Fantano, like I think he has quite a bit of relevance. And of course, there are some people who always kind of wait for his opinion and then decide whether they want to listen to an album or not. How much do critics influence your listening choices? Well, a little bit because I love to check out like the 1001 albums you must hear before you die and the Rolling Stones top 500, and yeah, those lists mostly kind of affect me because I kind of like just looking at those lists and then picking up albums to listen to, and I also kind of yeah, I'm interested in kind of development of music and musical history and things like that. So I want to kind of know what were some of the important bands of particular like musical movements and genres. So I think there kind of critics can influence me quite a lot. What's your take on the best albums of all time lists? Well, like I just said, I enjoy looking at them, but I often disagree with what's included. And I think they have gone like into very kind of optimist direction that you sometimes have like Beyonce and Taylor Swift near the top of the list. And I think that's not very critical of the critics to just put something that's just popular there. So I think, yeah, obviously popularity influence things like that should affect what goes to those lists. But I think we should always also think about the aesthetic merits and the musical merits, songwriting merits and stuff like that. And something being popular doesn't mean that it's good music. Yeah. But yeah, those lists, like they have always like some albums that I agree with and then some that I don't. And I also don't like that they kind of ignore certain genres of music and then the genres of music that they ignore tend to be the ones that actually have some depth and complexity to them. They tend to be genres where the musicians actually know how to play an instrument properly. So like metal and jazz, for example. Yeah. Yeah, they like to put the one like Coltrane there to represent jazz, but then they let's put 5 Taylor Swift albums and stuff like that. And yeah, not really into that. Yeah. Have you ever written about music reviews, essays, forum posts? Not really, actually. I've just talked about music, but not really written about it, any reviews or essays or anything like that. So yeah, I don't think I've ever really written about it. Well, it says forum post. Like as a small kid, I wrote some forum posts that I'm going to cringe at now if they still existed. But yeah, but that doesn't really count in my opinion. But yeah, no reviews or essays. But I enjoy writing from time to time, so I should maybe write some essays and stuff or reviews. And I've sometimes thought about like starting a blog where I could sometimes write if I get inspired. But those were all the questions, so let me know what you think of any of these questions or any of the band songs or artists that I mentioned or whatever. Thanks for watching. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.